Welcome to the Mind Body Mountain. You know, your body doesn't know what's happening in the world. It only knows what your mind tells it. So your body only physically responds to the information your mind gives it. In this video, I'll explore the consequences of that, especially when we are living with trauma. Let's start with the following thoughts. If you're sitting safely on the sofa watching television, yet your body is filled with anxiety, why is that? If you're lying safely in bed, overwhelmed by sadness and completely drained of energy, why is that? If you're sitting safely at the dinner table, yet your mind is trapped in OCD looping thoughts, why is that? If you're safe, why does the body still respond as though you're in danger? Let's go a bit slow for a second. So, your body doesn't know what's happening in the world. It relies on your brain to tell it. Imagine you're at home watching TV and your brain has a thought. It might think, it's Friday evening, we've got the whole weekend ahead, this is great. And then your body relaxes. But now imagine you're watching a sad film. Nothing has changed around you, and you're still on the sofa with the whole weekend ahead of you. Yet your brain is thinking about loss, grief, and death. Your body responds with the emotion of sadness, which manifests as physical sensations that are uncomfortable and often painful. Why? Because the body doesn't respond only to reality. It just responds to the information it receives from the mind. Even when you know the story is fictional, your body can still react as though it's real. Let me say that another way. The body doesn't respond only to reality. It relies on and responds to the information it receives from the mind. Before we go any further, I think it's helpful to simplify thoughts into two types. I tend to think of them as direct thoughts and incidental thoughts. So, an incidental thought might be, when I'm sitting on the sofa watching TV, these thoughts might pop up into my conscious awareness. I need a haircut, or we're running low on milk. Now, a direct thought relates to what's happening right now in this situation and in this context. It's not incidental, it's relevant to the moment. So that type of thought may be, it's cold in here, I should put a jumper on. After trauma, both types of thought become more frequent. Why? Because a sensitized nervous system creates hypervigilance. The mind is constantly scanning, assessing, and reassessing for danger, and that increases the volume of thoughts. But trauma also changes their content. After PTSD or CPTSD, many thoughts are filtered through a sense of danger rather than safety. The result is a mind that is thinking far more often and far more fearfully than a person who doesn't live with trauma. So let's just recap. If the body doesn't respond only to reality, but to the information it receives from the mind, then a sensitized nervous system is constantly being told that danger is present, even when it isn't. In other words, a traumatized mind keeps feeding a sensitized nervous system the message that survival is still necessary. And so what happens next? Well, let's go back to our example. This time I'm sitting on my sofa watching a comedy on the telly when my mind has an incidental fear-based thought. The autonomic nervous system interprets it as a threat and increases the threat response that is already running. Anxiety intensifies, or for someone in a shutdown response, exhaustion, heaviness, and low mood will deepen. One incidental thought has changed the state of the whole nervous system, even though nothing in reality has changed. The body is solely reacting to the mind's prediction. Now, as the body responds to the mind's prediction, the emotion of fear manifests as painful and uncomfortable sensations. Those sensations don't prove the thought is true, but they make it feel true. And once a thought feels true, the danger feels real. We've mistaken a feeling for evidence. The body feeds information back to the mind. The mind generates more fearful thoughts, and the cycle continues. The mind informs the body appears to confirm the mind. This loop continues until our attention, meaning our thoughts, are taken away or distracted. We might sleep, we might medicate or co-regulate. We could go for a walk, or we could seek alcohol, chocolate, or something else. What all of these have in common is that they interrupt the fearful stream of thoughts reaching the nervous system. As the fearful thinking subsides, so does the threat response. To summarize, trauma, the threat response has one main source of information, the mind. Change the information, meaning the thoughts, and you change the response. You could say that the body holds the score, meaning the physical results, but the mind plays the game. So how do we apply this to allowing? How do we apply this information to approaches such as somatic experiencing? Well, you might think that these techniques are body-based. But when trauma is involved, allowing depends just as much on the mind. Without trauma, emotions and sensations can move through the body with very little or sometimes no conscious thought at all. When we're in a state of flow or conscious awareness, for example, there is no thought. The sensations and emotions will be there and they'll rise and they'll fall. But with trauma, thoughts become central. First, we place our attention on the sensation as we may be distracted or avoidant. Then we decide how to relate to the sensation. We allow it by accepting it. And we accept it by knowing and thinking this emotion or sensation may be painful, but it isn't dangerous. The people who struggle with allowing are struggling because of what they believe the sensation means. They're thinking something is wrong, this is too much, What if this gets worse? Something bad is going to happen, or I can't cope, or I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. There will be something in their allowing, no matter how good they think they've gotten at it, that is fearful. And every one of those thoughts tells the nervous system that danger is present, which means that the threat response remains in a higher gear. So that's why allowing isn't just about feeling the body. It's about changing the meaning the mind gives to what the body is feeling. This all takes a lot of practice and belief in what I'm saying. And that's why the allowing videos help, because they provide reassurance and more information about why emotions and sensations are not dangerous when they are caused by the threat response. With time, when it really, really clicks, the nervous system receives a different message. I can experience this and remain safe. Then the mind stops treating the sensations and emotions as evidence of danger, and the feedback loop begins to weaken. So, what helps you recover? Knowledge and practice. Knowledge gives you a new understanding of what's happening. If you'd like to build on that knowledge, have a look at my guidance playlist where I explain the traumatized mind in much more detail. And practice. Practice gives your nervous system, and I mean practice allowing or practicing your somatic experiencing, it gives your nervous system the repeated lived experiences of safety. Because we're looking at the level of deeply learned patterns. We're looking at the subconscious, and repetition is essential because it builds belief. It takes time for the nervous system to update what it has learned. And at first, your symptoms may become much more intense because for the first time in a long time, you're allowing emotions such as fear, sadness, and anger instead of avoiding them. And that can feel worse before it feels better. But if you hold the line and remember that these sensations are painful but not dangerous, the nervous system gradually begins to change. Over time, these sensations lose their intensity. The symptoms begin to fade, and the threat response slowly returns to where it was always designed to be. So that's allowing or somatic experiencing, and how our thoughts determine whether allowing succeeds or fails. But how do we address the real problem, or said differently, the upstream problem? How do we reduce the increased volume of thoughts and change their fear-based content created by a hypervigilant mind and a sensitized nervous system? Well, we practice meditation, and not just any type of meditation though. Certain meditation practices develop a very specific skill, and that's the ability to witness our thoughts rather than automatically engaging with them. We begin to see that thoughts can arrive with an authority that they haven't earned. They can exaggerate, catastrophize, and even invent stories that simply aren't true. We learn to stop treating every thought as important, every prediction as reality, and every feeling as evidence. As we become less entangled with our thoughts, we send fewer messages of danger to the nervous system. And as the messages of danger reduce, so does the threat response. Remember, the body can only respond to the information it receives from the mind. Change your relationship with your thoughts, and you change the information your nervous system is receiving. And just as a side note, but one for me that is crucial, for thousands of years, Zen Buddhist monks have sat in meditation, all beginning with the same thing: a human mind and a human nervous system. Their aim was to reach a state of profound peace, where thoughts quietened and awareness remained. But nobody arrived there with a fully regulated nervous system. They've all been real people with real families or caregivers and friends. And even the toddlers that we see had still a nervous system that had some level of development to it. Each person brought their own baggage and with it their own dysfunction. And they were taught how to relate differently to their thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. Because how else could they sit there for hour upon hour if they weren't taught those basic techniques to allow them to do just that? So they were taught and they learned not to fear, not to resist, and not to become entangled. That's exactly what we're trying to do in trauma recovery. We're learning that thoughts don't have to be believed, emotions don't have to be feared, and sensations don't have to be resisted. When I realized that, it completely changed my perspective. I realized that thousands of years of very, very practical knowledge already existed on how to work with the mind and body. I'm less interested in the spiritual beliefs. I'm more interested in the direct meditation practices that teach us how to live with greater awareness of our reality, less fear, and more peace. To me, that aligned perfectly with healing a sensitized nervous system. So rest assured, trauma recovery isn't teaching us something new. It's rediscovering something humanity has been practicing for thousands of years. Back to meditation. When we put what we learn in meditation into practice in everyday life, we can make real progress. Every time we allow a fearful thought to come and then go without engaging with it, we send our nervous system a message of safety. This is what people mean when they say, send your nervous system a message of safety. The message isn't sent by saying the words or stroking the vagus nerve. It's sent by how we relate to our thoughts. And I do this as often as I remember to. For example, if I'm watching television and a worrying thought appears, if it's irrelevant and I don't want to engage with it, I place my awareness in my body. I notice, I feel, and then I allow and accept the sensations that are present. And then I bring my attention to feeling my breath and the air that's entering my nostrils And I do this for a while until I just seem to switch off and become engrossed in the TV again. And if the needless thought returns, I simply return to my breath and my body and continue with my practice. And I also repeat this very regularly throughout the day. Basically, if I need to think to solve a problem or to complete a task in that moment in time, then I think. Otherwise, I'm not interested in unnecessary thinking, especially somebody who's come out of trauma. I'm here to overcompensate in the other direction and to give my mind and body a break. So whenever I notice my mind wandering, I return my attention to my breath and the sensations in my body. And I do that again and again. The effect of combining grounded awareness with less unrequired thinking has been profound, and I have a calmer nervous system. And I've also noticed that I don't have nearly as many thoughts. You may have noticed that I repeatedly talk about returning my attention to the feeling of my breath entering my nostrils. And this simple technique helps me to disentangle from thoughts in the present moment. With regular practice, it does something even more important. It gradually reduces both the volume of thoughts entering conscious awareness and the frequency with which those thoughts are fear-based. You may have heard of Eckhart Tolle, author of The Power of Now. If you listen to his talks, you'll notice that he frequently pauses and says something like, "We are all here now in this room." He'll say it in the middle of what he's talking about, in the middle of the subject, quite a few times. And those pauses and moments of return are deliberate. And in the past, he's explained that he regularly brings his mind back to the present by bringing his awareness to the room, then to feeling into his body, and then becoming aware of his breath. And this is something that you can practice as often as you remember to. And at first, this might seem like a simple mindfulness exercise, but it's so much more than that. Every time we return to the present, instead of following a fearful thought, we stop sending another message of danger to the nervous system. And every time we allow a sensation without interpreting it as a threat, we teach the nervous system something new. We teach it that we're safe. It might be difficult to understand the power of the technique that I'm talking about. But if you can remember that we only live in the present, we can only work with the single thought or sensations that are appearing within us in that moment. And if that single thought presents itself and we do not engage with it and we simply witness it as a neutral witness, then we have prevented a fearful piece of communication interfacing with the nervous system. Now, if we do that repeatedly and we consolidate that, what a difference it makes to the nervous system. That is precisely how a sensitized nervous system begins to change. We're just working in the present moment because we have nothing more that we can work with. So it's not because we're forcing the body to relax, but because with time and practice, we change the information the body was receiving. The body doesn't respond only to reality. It responds to the information it receives from the mind. And when that information changes, then the body can change too. Perhaps that's why I believe the body holds the score, but the mind plays the game. Thank you all for listening. And if you wish to support the channel, have a look at joining the membership. And in the meantime, please take care of yourself, and I shall see you on the next one.